Hi, folks. It's vacation season, so we thought we'd play a best of episode to keep you entertained until we get back ourselves. We chose this particular episode, number 29 from 2 years ago, What is a Libertarian? For two reasons. One, we have many new listeners from 2 years ago, and they might not have heard it originally. And two, most people don't know this, but a Libertarian candidate for president will be on the ballot in all 50 states come November. And by the way, for those who think it's time we try a woman for president after 45 straight men, well, the Libertarian candidate is a woman by the name of Jo Jorgensen. Her website, by the way, is jo20.com. Moreover, like 2016, many people think there will only be a choice of two inferior candidates in Trump and Biden. And I could go on and on about the limitations of both of them. My contention, among many other outside the norm things you'll hear on this episode, is that the duopoly itself and its supporting lobbyists and rampant self-interest is truly the greatest threat to our future. The Democrats and Republicans need some serious competition, and frankly, they've both done an awful job for the better part of the last 20 years. Why not consider voting Libertarian this go-round and help us build a credible third choice? Thanks for considering that, and please enjoy learning a little more about libertarianism on this episode.
Promoting the free exchange of ideas, questioning the status quo, and having some fun along the way. This is the Are We Idiots Show. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, as mentioned, Richard Kroll and Mark Weaver on this glorious day. I thought I'd beat you to the punch of the weather.
Wow. Okay, so
Did I throw you off?
you did throw me off because I'd normally like to give the audience a weather report, but I'll open with this then. So two separate people have asked me about your dear brother-in-law, Grammy, and my close personal friend.
Yes.
Is this his real voice on the opening and closing?
We will find out next week. This is a little tease for next week because in studio, the voice, the intro voice and the outro voice of the Are We Idiots Show will be in studio. Not to do that, although we may make him do a live read, but he's actually going to be a subject matter expert on our topic for next week, and we'll tease that at the end of the show. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Rich, I have a quick quiz for you. What is 6 months old, has thousands of unique downloads, and is closing in on its 30th episode? Any guess what that might be? I'll give you a hint.
A newspaper.
One of the hosts is bald, and the other one's kind of a cranky guy,
But extremely well educated.
Answer. The Are We Idiots Show is the answer. So, hey, folks, let us know how we're doing as we're closing in on 30 episodes. Email us, suggestions@areweidiots.com. We'd love to hear from you.
By the way, the answer, my answer, a newspaper is actually what's red, white, and what's red and white, and what's blue, and red all over. What's black and white, and red all over.
Right. Yeah. We're going to go into the jokes now, corny jokes. Okay.
Hopefully not after I just butchered that one.
All right, so on this week's show, we have a little bit of an abbreviated schedule today because we have a lot to get to. But Idiots of the Week, Rich has some nominations right now, and then we're going to talk about what is a libertarian anyway. And I've been threatening to do this probably since show one, and Rich has graciously allowed me to talk about libertarianism today. So we'll try to get in as much as we can. And that's the extent of the show today. So,
whether you want to or not.
Yeah, whether you want to or not, you're going to hear about libertarianism today. All right, Richie, Idiots of the Week.
I have two
what
short
say
ones.
you?
I have two short ones, so you have as much time on the podium about libertarianism as I can give you.
Great.
All right, so the first one. Police say a Connecticut man arriving at court for a stolen car charge drove to court in a stolen car.
Well, how would he have gotten there?
Exactly.
There's no such thing as Uber or Lyft or a taxi or public trans.
No, not at all. Authorities say 25-year-old Jonathan Rivera was at Hartford Superior Court on Wednesday to appear before a judge on a charge of first-degree larceny and tampering with a motor vehicle. Parking authority agents scanning license plates outside the courthouse during his hearing found a car that had been reportedly stolen. Police kept an eye on the car and then arrested Rivera after he entered the car to go home. Now, luckily, the charges have been reduced. Rivera has now been charged with second-degree larceny for taking a motor vehicle without the owner's permission. So that's the first nominee.
Genius, obviously.
Second one in Virginia, 27-year-old Bradley Hardison won a donut eating contest at the Elizabeth City, Virginia Police Department's National Night Out Against Crime event. Nice little play on the donut part.
I like it.
Making fun of themselves. But remember, this is National Night Out Against Crime. Hardison has been charged with robbing a donut shop since the night out event.
He got addicted that night, and he couldn't resist himself.
Clearly just a preliminary event towards his crime spree. Police in Elizabeth City say Hardison, who became the champ by eating 8 glazed donuts in under 2 minutes, was charged with offenses caught on camera, including felony breaking and entering, felony safe cracking, and misdemeanor donut stealing in connection with a burglary at the Elizabeth City Dunkin' Donuts.
So he didn't actually steal donuts. He stole money from a donut shop. Safe cracking? I mean, that's a skill. It's kind of gone away with time, hasn't it?
But
safe cracker.
He snuck in a glazed donut or two during.
For sure.
You need energy.
I would have got the Munchkins. They're my favorite. You know, I know they're not good for you, but those little Munchkins, I'm like, you just pop them in, and they're just like I could eat like 10 of them.
Let's grab some
in the show. So okay, boy, that's a tough one. I would say I'll go with the donut thief. Why not? It's fun. And by the way, I don't know if you saw yesterday, people are revolting. Dunkin' Donuts is dropping donuts from their store name, supposedly. They're just going to be
not from the sky.
No, they're going to be just known as Dunkin'. And then everyone's up in arms about it because I guess they want to move away
They want to be coffee and sandwiches.
I guess, but they want to move away from the donut branding. But I don't know if that's good or bad, but I guess we'll find out. I will nominate the the donut thief as our idiot of the week.
Your turn to send the dollar.
I will, and that'll buy what? How many Munchkins do you think?
7.
All right, folks. So we're gonna transition, and as I mentioned multiple times, I've been wanting to do this show for a while. And if you went back and listened to our preface episode, you know that I have kind of a hidden motivation of doing this show. I have my libertarian views on things; those have come out on the many topics that we've discussed. But this show is really to do a primer on, and it's really an introduction.
Not a primer.
Not a primer. Primer on libertarianism. And I know I'm a total outlier and outcast from American society, but I happen to believe it's very logical. And if you consider how well our political system is working now, I say, why not give it a try? So here goes. And let me just first start, Richie, with a few caveats. So, again, this is just a primer. We're not going to cover libertarianism in great detail. No political philosophy, including Republican, Whig, Democrat, all the different political philosophies over the years. None of them are perfect. They all have flaws. Libertarianism is no exception to that. There's quite a lot of variation amongst libertarians. So there's this thing called an ANCAP, which is an anarcho-capitalist, which they are for almost no government. And then there's classic liberals, which a lot of people use classic liberal and libertarians, kind of interchangeably. They're a little bit more accepting of minimal government. That's where I come down, by the way. And then probably most importantly, I do not consider myself a very good spokesman for libertarianism. There's lots of people much more well-versed than myself.
Don't kid yourself.
No, I am. There's other great podcasts. Tom Woods has a really good podcast if you want to check that out. There are books by Adam Smith, Ayn Rand, Friedrich Hayek, Ludwig von Mises, Milton Friedman, Thomas Sowell, Henry Hazlitt, Murray Rothbard. There's many different sources of information on libertarianism, and I would encourage you, if you're interested, to go read about it in more detail. And then lastly, as a caveat, I am a libertarian small l. That doesn't necessarily mean I endorse the Libertarian Party. Just like if you're a Republican, You don't necessarily agree with everything that the Republican Party agrees with. There's lots of variation. It just so happens that the Libertarian Party currently is the closest to my beliefs and pure libertarian beliefs. It's not always perfect. Republicans probably disagree with a lot of things in the Republican Party platform. So, how's that? Before I go any further, am I okay on the caveats to the show?
Well, I was actually hoping. I thought you first said caviar. I was getting a little hungry. That would have been better. And secondly, you sound like an army of one in some respect.
Well, I feel that way sometimes, and I used to be a real army of one. Let me start with how I came to libertarianism. So, as you know, Rich, I love economics, and I've loved it since high school. And
That's why you're so excited.
Yeah, I'm very exciting and vibrant. But the free market capitalism has intrigued me since high school, which is going on 40 years now. And I really knew early on that, that property rights and free market capitalism was the best system so far discovered for people. And it has lifted more people, billions of people, out of poverty over the last several hundred years. And free market competition and open markets really are a huge determinant of societies that thrive. Okay, so that's where I came from. I used to believe I was a Republican. I believed in Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, kind of small. Well, at least he talked about smalling up government and being fiscally conservative, what have you. So I really liked the Reagan world, and I thought a lot about republicanism, and I used to believe, truthfully, that the U.S. military and us patrolling the whole world, and having bases all over the world, and that we were spreading democracy. I used to believe that was an overall good thing, until George W. Bush, and George W. Bush really changed me away from the Republican Party. He, of course, invaded Iraq, turned out on false evidence, killed millions of people, maimed a lot of U.S. soldiers, killed a lot of U.S. soldiers in the process. He didn't do it, but, the war did it. And that was a really hideous, horrid mistake that he did. He also put in Medicare Part D, which is a prescription benefit which was a government program to give away money and help the pharmaceutical companies. He did No Child Left Behind, which was a government program for education.
That's awful.
Awful. He ran up $5 trillion in debt. And it was really at that point, the second or third year into George W. Bush's term, that I just said, I'm done with the Republican Party. And I began to read a lot more about libertarianism. So before I go any further, I'm talking a lot on this show, I know. Where am I wrong?
Well, the first place you're wrong is that you enjoyed economics in high school. If I knew that, I don't know that we'd be friends.
Mr. Shiplet. I don't know if you remember Mr. Shiplet.
I do.
Jim Shiplet. I wonder if he's still with us. But that was my first economics teacher.
Yeah, I don't know we'd still be friends if I knew that back then.
Our buddy John Muntz was in my class with that. Jim Shiplet loved John Muntz. It was sickening, actually.
Is that why you got an A and really didn't do any work?
Probably.
So, hey, look, we all have reasons how we get to places in life. I think you took politics a lot more seriously at a younger age. You recognized certain social aspects related to government, good or bad, and then most of us were not paying attention, other than, it took a couple of years to realize, that war in Iraq was based on false premises, maybe to make amends for what happened with his dad. So I know some staunch Republicans love to this day George W., the same ones that love Trump. So I could see how a young, economic-driven, dry as a bone, influenced young guy could say, you know what, I need to find a better party. So your premise is understandable, a little complex, but we got off to a start I understand.
Good. All right, so and we'll talk more about the war thing later in the show, but let's give a little background on libertarianism. And it's not just something that has appeared in the recent past. Libertarianism goes back to John Locke. Englishman in the 1600s. It's Locke, Locke, by the way, if you want to look him up. But he was
Everybody's rushing to
go out to Google right now.
Encyclopedia Britannica right now.
There's a good wiki on him. But he was very, very influential to the founders of this country. And if you go back to the founders of this country and the Declaration of Independence, all of them were essentially libertarians. People don't know that, but they were seeking liberty from a tyrannical government. And individual liberty was this concept that John Locke came up with. And this whole, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, this inalienable rights, you love that word.
Huge.
This was a concept that was totally foreign to people at that time. In the old days, government and your life was not an individual right. Your life was at the bequest of the person in power. If there was a king, and if the king said you died, you died. You had no right to your life. And so this whole concept of individual liberty trumping the collective was very groundbreaking. And that's why we've said on this show that the U.S. government, the system of the U.S. government, is by far the best that's ever existed. And we're just trying to improve it. But we all acknowledge it is the best system that the founders did, and they were geniuses. It was an experiment, and it worked wonderfully.
Well, I'll tell you, the two-party system has changed dramatically. There was a time where whether you were Democrat or Republican, if something made sense, you'd collectively agree on it as a overall Congress and Senate, and it wasn't, it came from a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I can't vote for it, or vice versa. That's the case today.
Yeah.
Today, whether something's right or wrong, if it's party-driven, the party supports it. And I think that's what has peed you off in the last decade or two, where something could be completely wrong for the country, the people, the budget, and yet if it's Democrat-initiated, the Democrats will support it. If it's Republican-initiated, the Republicans will support it. And they'll also help squash each other, even if something's right. I now see a need for a third party, but I had no idea how to even begin getting there.
Yeah, and if you think about it, and this was part of my kind of practical conversion from republicanism to libertarianism. If you think about it, Milton Friedman used to have a line: "No one spends someone else's money as carefully as they spend their own." And if you think about it, that's our entire government. They don't care. It's not their money. If you're on a business trip and your government and your company is going to pay your expenses, don't you make a different decision about what you eat when you're out? Everyone does, right?
Yes, they do.
So this is the way the government runs, right? They have confiscated money out of our paychecks, and they don't spend it as carefully as they would their own money. And so therefore, government is woefully inefficient in almost everything they do. And I've argued on other shows, some of our biggest problems in society in America are because government has gotten involved in free markets. So education, finance, certainly healthcare. And that's another reason why I turned away from republicanism and of course, progressivism, because I just don't believe government is overall a good solution to most problems.
Yet we have the best government in the world. What does that say about other countries?
That's true, and we do dominate, and that's the argument that a lot of people will give me back on libertarianism is it could always be worse, and I totally fundamentally reject that argument, and I'll go into some examples of how it could be a lot better, and that's the way I like to focus. It could be a lot better.
Glass is always half full.
Right, and I'm a weird guy. I'll be the first to admit.
I'll be the second to admit that.
I'm a skeptic, but I'm an optimist, and that's a weird thing. Like a cynic would be saying, "Woe's me," and this is awful, and it will never get any better. I'm a skeptic. I don't believe the status quo should be unquestioned, but I also believe that there's creative solutions and disruptive solutions, and that goes for government as well.
Do you realize that if you combine a skeptic with an optimist, you get a realist?
I like to think so, but a lot of people think I'm just cranky all the time, but I'm not.
You're actually a nice person most of the time.
All right, so let's go to present day. What are the core principles of libertarians today? And again, there are lots of variations, but just in general. So limited government, we're going to talk about that. Individualism, so individual liberty as a primary value over the collective. Free markets, and as you might suspect, I don't like the idea of this tariff talk going on. We won't go into that today. Tolerance, this is a big one that comes up, and then peace. So limited government, individualism, free markets, tolerance, and peace.
Sounds like good things to me.
You'd think so, but it's not. I'm an outlier. So, some people use the catchphrase, do as you please, as long as you don't hurt me or take any of my stuff. That's the kind of like the layman's interpretation of libertarianism. The key piece of this, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but go out and look it up, is most libertarians believe in this thing called the non-aggression principle. And that's different from passivism. Passivism?
Passivism.
And the non-aggression principle is basically saying, you don't inject force on someone else unless that person is attacking you. And this really is how I feel about the military, the proper use of the military. Go back and we did a show on that, the proper use of the military. I think it's grown way out of proportion of what it should be and what the founders intended it to be. In the Constitution, it says we provide for the common defense, and I believe that we're mostly on offense, our military. And again, we're not bashing people that serve. I'm bashing the policy of an offensive military all around the world. I think the military could be severely limited and just be defensive in nature, and that's the same thing with the non-aggression principle. If someone's going to attack you, you have the right to defend yourself, and that's the way I believe the military should be. So what do you think about that, Rich? So pacifism versus non-aggression, but you're able to defend yourself. Doesn't that make logical sense? It does to me.
It's very logical. Dr. Spock says it's very logical. Here's the deal. We did the show on military might and policing the world. I'm a big, big fan of the military, as I mentioned before. Family, friends, people I know in the military, very dedicated. Anybody willing to give their life for their country is a better man than me.
Exactly.
But they're driven by obedience and rules that they don't control. And that's where the problem is. Why do we need to police the whole world? We already explained we're spending $1 billion in Germany, and they're one of the richest countries in the world. I don't think we need half the bases we do. And we still have democracy, and people aren't invading. It's not 1700. It's not even 1940, right? A lot of the problems are policing themselves due to the nuclear weapons and the ability to just reach further places than you used to. So out of the gate, I don't like the word pacifism. It sounds like weakness and being a baby and not being tough. But I agree on your first premise.
And by the way, we've mentioned it before, but we spend more on the military than the next 7 countries combined. So does that give you a little clue that we might be going overboard? All right, so if I were king, and I don't believe in kings, I believe in individual liberty. I'm not a big hierarchy person. But how would our present-day government look differently if libertarians were in charge? So first is a severely limited federal government, and that would mean lower taxes because you wouldn't have to pay as much to support a limited government. But basically, government would be for the purposes of protecting life, liberty, and property, which is what it was originally intended to. The federal government for the first 100 years of this country was extremely small. We talked about this in our federal government show. But just for example, no Department of Education. That didn't exist till the Carter administration. We don't need it now. Schools should be run locally. No Department of Homeland Security. And people will say, what do you mean we need Homeland Security? Well, we have the FBI, we have the Coast Guard, we have the Secret Service, we have the ATF, we have the DEA, we have the CIA, we have the actual Army and Navy and Air Force and Marines. I mean, why do we need Homeland Security? Everyone knows the airport security stuff doesn't even work. They get through 80% of the time, they miss the things. Now we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people working in, quote, Homeland Security. We have all these redundant security services. That should go away. Why wouldn't you give the option to opt out of Social Security? If libertarians were in charge, they'd say, no, you don't have to be part of this socialist program. Don't. If you don't want to be in it when you're 22, opt out, save for retirement yourself. Does that sound like a reasonable thing? Let people have the choice. Why is participation in Social Security compulsory? Ever thought about that?
Don't know. Other than a forced retirement plan, which most people, when they're 22, don't have the brains to do, including myself. So, I mean, I don't mind Social Security personally because I wouldn't have done a good job on my own. But will it even be there in 10 years or 12 years or 15 years?
Right. And the government has done a horrid job of implementing Social Security. It's not a trust fund. It's paid by the people currently for the people that are retiring. It's a pay-go system. And everyone knows it's not going to be sufficient for retirement. But why wouldn't you give people the option to opt out? And you don't, if you opt out when you're 20 and you don't have enough when you're retirement, then you got to rely on family or friends. And people say, well, that's harsh. Well, yeah, it's harsh, but it's not working now. And you're taking money from people who don't necessarily want it taken from them. I don't believe in that.
People just pay their taxes. They don't really analyze the line items and the whys for the future.
How else would it be different? No tariffs anywhere in the world. That's a joke. There's thousands of tariffs. The U.S. places tariffs on thousands of goods, and so do the other countries that try to protect their industries. A voucher system instead of the public education system, or at least a voucher system in addition to the public education system, so people would have free choice. We talked about defensive military only. In my mind, if you're not willing to commit your life or your son or daughter's life to defend the cause, then probably the cause isn't good enough to go to war over. So unless we're being attacked, if this country was being attacked, you and I would probably stand out there with pitchforks and guns to defend our families and our property, right? But most of our wars are not that. In fact, no one's invaded us. You could say 9/11 was an invasion, but it wasn't really an invasion. It was a strike. And then Pearl Harbor. And that's basically it. Why are we involved in this perpetual war all over the world and killing millions of people in the process? I don't like it. I'm a libertarian, and I'm different. I understand. A lot of people think this is great that we police the world and we spread democracy. I don't think the costs are worth it.
Well,
am I going to get some hate mail on that one?
If you make sense and you're Dr. Spock logical and you're articulating this in an eloquent, really elegant way like you just did, I mean, how does a sane person argue with most of that? The founding fathers were geniuses. They had all this in mind to protect the immediate population and future populations. Things just evolved as different high-level people got involved and exercised their might and their stamp on American history, and things are dramatically different. But the way you just laid that out, even me, who's looking to be the skeptic on some of this, is thinking it all sounds good so far.
Good. So get out of healthcare. Banking, mortgages, college loans. We talked about this on the college show a few weeks back. College loans, availability of college loans from the government has increased the cost of college exponentially. I'd have a balanced budget amendment. Most libertarians would have a balanced budget amendment. It's an absolute sham that our government, both Republicans and Democrats, have run up $21 trillion in debt. It's egregious. We have about 10 minutes left, Rich. I wanted to get into what are some common differences with traditional conservatives and common differences with leftists and progressives. And I think this is a good opportunity for you to kind of shoot holes in libertarianism, and I'll try to defend them the best I can. So I'll take the easy one first. Libertarians are very far away from leftists and progressives because generally leftists, progressives, some people would use the term liberal. I reject using that term. They want big government. They want big government solutions. They don't believe individuals are capable of taking care of themselves, and they want, they have this protective, this compassion that drives them supposedly. But really, if you look at the history, government programs don't work. They make things worse in a lot of cases. And why would you trust them with more money and more responsibility? So libertarians are far, far away from progressives. And so that's the easy one. The harder one is conservatives. And the most common thing I get pushed back on is two things. The military, which we talked about. And the first thing that people say is, well, if we didn't want to get involved in other people's business, what would have happened with Hitler? right? That's the biggest pushback. Like, would you have just let Hitler run all throughout the world? You never. And my answer to that is possibly. Possibly Hitler could have run through all Europe, killed millions of people, and maybe that would have happened, right? If you look at history, though, whenever countries expand their geography, the Roman Empire did this, Genghis Khan did this. Certainly, you could make an argument that present-day America is doing this. It's really hard to control territory afar. The people rebel. It's very expensive. It's very cost-effective, and cost prohibitive. And maybe Hitler would have been turned back by people. I don't know. It's a good argument. I'm not saying that. It's a good argument, and libertarians probably wouldn't have gotten involved with England and France, and maybe that would have been a mistake. So it's a good argument. What do you think about the unique military responsibility that America has?
Well, you just dumped a ton on my feeble frontal cortex short-term memory. So let me see if I can peel this away a little bit. So on the one hand, let's talk about real quick the far left or the progressive liberal mentality of the intentions were good. Kind of like communism, the intentions were good.
Right.
Where you want to eliminate poverty. You don't want anyone to have special privileges. You want to protect the elderly, the sickly, the folks that don't have the physical or mental capabilities to protect themselves or earn a living. So we developed all these programs, left-wing democratic programs, to take care of everybody in need. However, it went up way far and above the folks that actually need it, and then a lot of lazy folks, a lot of people that aren't willing to do things the hard way,
right,
took advantage of the programs,
right,
and now it's spiraled out of control. On the other far side, the conservative side, the far right, I think there's a misinterpretation with this means denouncing the military.
Right.
Right?
I totally agree with that.
I think it means, oh, you're anti-military. No, you're not. Oh, you're anti-defending yourself against somebody like Hitler. No, you're not. It's military where needed, military striking back where needed, military protecting the world when needed. Not proactively as insurance policy everywhere in places that are not needed, or proactively being aggressive or predicting where you might, we better go in the Middle East in these areas because we think that's where we need to be. That's where mistakes are made. And I believe in the case of Hitler, you couldn't let it run wild because as it went into countries that are our allies, eventually, if enough might was garnered by Hitler, then we were also susceptible. So there's misinterpretations. It's not black or white.
Okay, and then the second one, which there's a lot of disagreement with conservatives on, is on the moral front, okay? And if you are libertarian, I mentioned earlier, tolerance is one of the principles. And this is really where I had to struggle with because I am largely conservative. I have, I'm a Christian, and I believe certain ways of living and trying to influence my kids and what have you. And there's a tendency for people to want laws and government to back that up and promote their values and even promote Judeo-Christian values. I hear that a lot on Fox News or something like, that's the way this country was founded. Christians founded this country, and that's, what have you. And what I really came to the fact is that the best way to protect my freedom to worship and have the values and morals that I want for myself is to not have government involved in that whatsoever. But what comes with that is you have to put up with a lot of other people's values that you don't agree with. That's where the tolerance comes in. And so there's lots of stuff in society that I don't agree with, but I have to say, hey, if that's okay for you and you're not hurting me or my family or anyone else, you should be free to do that. And so, obviously, homosexuality is commonplace. I'm not a homosexual, but a lot of people rejected that, for years. Now it's commonplace. There's the abortion issue. We haven't done a show on pro-life yet, but libertarians are pretty much split on pro-life. There's about half of us that believe that the individual liberty of the child is preeminent. And there's a whole other half of people that say that the woman, because the child is not viable yet, again, this is not my words, this is their words, that she has the right to her individual liberty to do with her body as she sees fit. I'm on the former, but that's a big point of contention in libertarianism and certainly with conservatives.
These are all slippery slopes because they're based on belief systems, and there are strong sides on for and against with all these issues. So, I don't know what the founding fathers initially intended, but life is also different. The one problem you have is you're a staunch literalist, and
I haven't heard that in several episodes.
Yes, I needed a place to bring it up. 273 years later, haven't heard that number in a while either. Times are different. So I do think the founding fathers were geniuses, but for the time.
But do you agree, though, that you don't want government dictating morals? Because what happens if an atheist becomes in charge? Or, I'm Christian. What happens if Muslims become the majority and they come? You don't want government mandating morality and or religion. That's very, very dangerous. It's great while you're in charge, but not so great when you're not.
But agreed. But there are times when somebody can use a belief system to go against the norm of what is viewed as right and wrong. Oh, I'm not going to give my child an antibiotic because it's against our religion and the child dies. Right. Oh, that guy can go commit a crime because it's okay in his religion but not mine. But if you're
parameters around if you're hurting other people, that's where the line is, right? If you're committing a crime or hurting someone, well then that's an acknowledged line. But if you're not hurting anyone, then it should be left alone.
But the potential to incite a riot without hurting someone.
Now we're going to go back to the free speech argument. First Amendment, Richie.
Burning flags and doing things that can incite a riot.
Perfectly legal. Don't inject force on someone.
Or walking down the middle of the street in Harlem and shouting the N-word. There are things that should be stopped.
There may be consequences, but that shouldn't be illegal.
Well, I'm a common sense person. You're a literalist.
Okay. I believe in the Constitution.
I believe in common sense around the Constitution.
Well, hopefully, folks, I gave you a little primer on libertarianism today. We are out of time, and I just want to make sure you tune in next week. We teased it at the beginning, but we're going to have a special guest, Chris Mooney, in studio, and the topic is going to be the stigma of mental illness in our society and how this posture has greatly affected a lot of families and in this nation. It's an important topic. People don't like to talk about it. It's kind of taboo. But Chris is going to be here next week to help us understand more. And as always, please remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See y'all next week. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Are We Idiots Show. Please subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher so you can enjoy all episodes.